Here we are in the after hours segment. So, okay, so back to our question. I have a question here. There is momentum right now. I believe that there's momentum as far as our awakening. Probably because I feel it, as I'm right in the center of it. But I'm just a basic, average meat and potatoes kind of person with a microphone, and I believe that we've got some pretty good reach as people wake up. Here are my philosophies that I tell all of our listening audience. Never really trust anybody. Research and read and listen to everything you can get your hands on. And, of course, never fully believe anything that you haven't researched yourself. On those principles, our show is growing by leaps and bounds. Do you believe that we can have this mass awakening that we need in a short period of time? It needs to happen in a short period of time. Do you believe that our efforts will grow exponentially and more people will become aware to this?
I'm not seeing any signs of that at the moment. That's at large scale. I'm seeing signs that it's happening. That it is happening, but I think the rate at which it's happening is relatively. I think there's an undercurrent, if you will. I mean, the biggest thing will come when people start switching off TV and ditching the newspapers. If we see that happening in large numbers, then there'll be some hope. But I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing it in my family around me. I mean, for example, if I look at my own family, I've got quite a large immediate family, and only one or two of those seem to have any type of interest in what I'm saying and doing, and the rest just they don't want to know. They really don't want to know.
They don't want to know.
No. So, until that changes substantially, I don't see things changing rapidly. I could be wrong, but there's definitely an undercurrent, but it's not something that's going to sweep away these huge walls that are in front of us just yet. Going on the experience we had. For example, when Dr. Wood did the talks we got invited to do a talk in Bologna in 2011, and when these guys had confirmed they were going to invite us, and they said they were going to pay the airfares, I put the word out that Dr. Wood was going to come and do some stuff in the UK, and we had 2 or 3 groups that said, "Oh yeah, we if you could come and do a talk with us, that'd be great. We'll set up the room and we'll pay the train fare and so on," and that happened. I think we got 2 or 3 talks, maybe 4 talks last year, but then we had about 7 this year, 7 or 8. So it kind of doubled this year. So there was double the interest. So that was a good sign. I can obviously see that. That there's been a progress there, but positive progress. So that's I suppose the only way I can answer that question. Now in relation to this directly. Yeah. Now
you've been in this business of communicating this knowledge that you've acquired on your own and helping to share Dr. Judy's research. How do you recommend that somebody that's just now coming awake to it? I mean, obviously, they need to be very careful what they say as to how they've received this information. They could be out there talking about, red hot molten metal and stuff like that muddles everything up. But how do you recommend that somebody shares this information with their friends and family?
Well, what they can do is, on my website, I've got some PDF booklets, which are very short, like about they're 10 pages long, and they're just basically basic set of pictures and questions about 9/11. And I've got, obviously, I give out these DVDs as well. And they're, I think, a good starting point if people are wanting to just say, well, have a look at this, see what you think of it. And I've tried to make those materials available. They're not, they're not totally brilliant. They're not. I'm not a professional, desktop publishing artist or anything. But I think they're perfectly adequate as teaching aids. I'm used to developing teaching aids for the tutoring work that I've done, and they're kind of along those lines to some extent, perhaps even simpler than a lot of the other materials that I've used in my own sort of tutoring and stuff. So that's a starting point. You could get a little banner made. There's a chap called Matt Nows. He's got this. He's got a link where you can just download the banner and get that made. I think for about $40 or something, and walk down the street with that or something, if you feel so inclined. you could get posters done if people want to design a poster or something and send me a PDF of it. Say, is this okay, Andrew? Do you think this gets the message across properly? I'm happy to look at that and say yes, and that'll be good, or maybe you can change this heading or something. Because like you say, we do get people putting they'll say, oh, the tower's vaporized, for example, and they think they're giving the right description, but actually they didn't vaporize, they turned to dust, and it's important to distinguish between those two. So there are little things like that, that you've got to be a bit careful about. So DVDs, posters, people can write to me about those. We don't have any distributor in the US for such things particularly, although I know Matt Nouse, I can put people in touch with Matt Nouse. He's got some materials, I think. He can send them DVDs of some of the lectures and so on.
Let me ask you something. What we have a broad and diverse group of people in our listenership. Where do you need help? I mean, we need volunteers to assist you. Do you need any particular area of help? I mean, graphic artists, maybe to do an infographic or anything like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if again, if people want to take some of the graphics, say on Dr. Wood's website, some of the key pictures,
right,
this sort of thing, and put them into an attractive design.
Mm-hmm.
I can point them at flyers and things that I've done. I've got a couple of leaflets that I distribute.
Mm-hmm.
So if people want to write to me, and I can give them the link to those or attach them to an email, and if they can make a better job than I have,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. I'm happy to send them those. And if they think, oh, that's a bit ropey, I can do better than that, fantastic.
Awesome.
If they can get the same information, but in a better format, then brilliant. Just write to me and I'll send them the links. And
an important thing to communicate, and you probably emphasize this point, we don't necessarily set up talking points for our brainwashing, but we do believe that it's important. Like I had to deprogram myself and not say collapse. The demise of the towers is so much more important because saying collapse implies something completely different than what actually happens. But that muddling could take place if we're not using the proper terminology, because we literally have to deprogram everyone from the PSYOP.
Right, and if people want to just check if they're going to do anything like make a post, then yeah, absolutely don't put why did the towers collapse or whatever. Obviously put how were they destroyed. As another way of putting that. Yeah, absolutely. The language is more important than you might think at this point in terms of the description of things, because otherwise people are going to get in the wrong end of the stick.
Right. We have to counter the cover-up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other general point that I make is some people are just not ready for this information. However you present it,
right.
However much you simplify it, or
right.
However compelling you make it, however visually appealing you make it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are not ready for it. So
right.
if you're getting to the point where it's not really, it's not going in. Don't ruin your friendships. Don't ruin your relationships. I've managed quite well in that I haven't really ruined any of my relationships or friendships.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a number of people I've kind of drifted away from,
mm-hmm.
And I don't have the same interactions with them as I did. But nevertheless, I've managed not to upset people, if you see what I mean. The door is still open to them communicating with me.
Right.
If they wish to do that. In other words, I've never returned around and said to one, "Oh, you're just an idiot," because you won't accept that the tower status. I think you're just an idiot, and I just think you're being stupid. I've never said that to anyone.
Right.
And if you can resist saying that to anyone, I think ultimately it'll work out better. People have alienated families and friends and caused a lot of grief over this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it can always be avoided. I'm not saying that. I mean, people grow and change, and
well, you know what, Andrew, I'm sure you'll agree with this. I have, through my own personal experience, from the point at which I discovered around 2006 that 9/11 was an inside job. When I settled into that reality, there's an emotional process you have to go through that needs to fall in line with how you communicate this. Because if you run around and you're like, "Oh my God, 9/11 was an inside job, nanothermite, blah, 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 blah," and you start just babbling stuff at somebody that has no idea how to receive that, if you haven't learned how to communicate this to somebody effectively, or you haven't recognized what phase of the emotional process, literally a grieving process almost.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is very much like that, yeah.
You have to learn your way through how to communicate with the people around you. Otherwise, they're going to think you're a wingnut.
Mm-hmm. We
Absolutely.
get a lot of people that come in and they have their own ideas about how things are going, their own theories, their own research. They come in and especially in our chat, and they want everybody to know what they've found and they're excited about it.
Right.
And if they get any kind of backlash or any kind of question about it, somebody's like, I don't know, you know, because they've never looked at it the way that person has looked at. Man, they get very angry. They get very aggressive.
Mm.
Would be the word. They get aggressive, and and it's like, and it doesn't. Then everybody starts arguing and they start calling each other names, and then all is lost.
Yeah, like how I call trolls names. I love that sometimes, but that's mainly instigatory. But anyways,
right.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody's a troll that disagrees.
No, but you know what? But you know what? The most skillful ones, they pose those questions very, very skillfully because they're very, very good at the psyop. Like, oh, Peter, you really don't have a lot of listeners. Oh, really? Okay. Well, have you heard me mention that I'd rather stay small, lean, with a bunch of people that are very well educated, have free minds? And I don't want millions of listeners like Alex Jones. I want a very small listenership of people that don't trust anybody and they only believe what they research themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that are not willing to exclude any part of the evidence. But anyways, Andrew, I thank you so much for all of your time. Do you have anything further to add here on this after hour segment?
Well, we do have a question, Andrew. Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
It was asked some time ago, so I thought maybe you might want to hear this one. It says, do you know or have you heard of Sterling Allen and PestWiki.com?
Oh, yes, very much so. Yes, actually, Sterling Allen was one of the speakers at the energy conference in Holland. So I didn't speak with him there, but I did meet him. He was in Dr. Wood's talk, and he was the person that was very concerned about the tritium evidence being brought up in the lecture by Dr. Wood. And he actually stood up, went to the front and asked her, told her that she'd replayed this tritium video in the previous hour, and there's no need to play it again. So Sterling Allen was very concerned about the tritium evidence in relation to what was found in the dust from the World Trade Center. He also said quite categorically that he was very good friends with Stephen E. Jones. And then, as I said in the broadcast, he posted this short article by Stephen E. Jones just after the conference about cold fusion, in relation to cold fusion. So you can find that on Pez. I think it's on the PesWiki site, actually. So yes, I'm quite familiar with Sterling Allen. And again, he's one of these guys. I have some very serious questions, which I may even email him these questions before too long. I've been meaning to do that, actually. And he said on Coast to Coast very recently, this was, I think, on the 6th of December, or maybe after that. No, it was sooner than that. I think it was last week, about a week ago. He said on Coast to Coast, this is Sterling Allen, that he'd shared a room with Nick Begich at the conference, which Nick Begich was one of the other speakers. And I might mention, actually, because Nick Begich was indeed one of the other speakers, and I indeed was one of the audience in his presentation, which was about HAARP. And that presentation was recorded, as was my question to Mr. Begich, who, as you know, is the son of former Senator Begich,
yes,
who was killed in a plane crash, I believe. But I asked Nick Begich why, in 2006, when he was speaking to Art Bell on Coast to Coast, he said that the bombing of Afghanistan was justified. And I've got an audio recording of actually saying that the bombing of Afghanistan was justified, and indeed that the USA was justified in stomping them back to the Stone Age, to use Nick Begich's expression.
Wow.
And I know for a fact, because I was there, that Mr. Begich sat and watched Dr. Wood's presentation at said conference in Holland. And so at the end of his presentation, I thanked him for bringing forward the information about the HAARP array, which I think he's nevertheless played an important role in helping to raise the awareness of that rather unpleasant type of project. But I asked him, now that he'd sat through Dr. Wood's presentation, and there was no doubt at all that Al-Qaeda had nothing to do with the destruction of the World Trade Center, and indeed there was no evidence to suggest that that was true, if he still considered that the bombing of Afghanistan was justified.
Fair question.
And his answer was very interesting, because he said there are a lot of questions about 9/11, but if people want to have a theocracy, they can have a theocracy, and if they want a democracy, they can have a democracy. And then he said, people in this room would be quite surprised at my attitude to warfare and defence, and he didn't answer my question. In other words, he didn't say, oh, well, actually, now I've changed my mind and I realise I was wrong to state that the bombing of Afghanistan was justified. He didn't say that. And after I'd asked that question and after he'd answered it, I had several people came up to me in the room afterwards with very open very open-mouthed and very ashen looks on their face, because they realised that what Mr. Begich was part of the psychological operation, which was trying to justify the existence of HARP. Because if you listen to the way that his talk unfolded, and how, for example, Mr. Begich stated that he'd been invited to a closed conference on a ship for 12 days with the Aga Khan as one of the other people, as a part of the conference delegates, and he was bragging about that, I think people began to get an impression of where Mr. Begich was.
Very interesting.
In the pecking order of things, and that's all been recorded, and I'm hoping that that will be posted on their videos before too long. In fact, I can probably get a hold of recordings on somebody else.
Yeah, can you send that to me as soon as possible? Because I do have contact, and I've had him on my show, Dr. Nick Begich. And I'd like to.
I'll try and get hold of the recording. The recording that I know was made was by a friend of mine. I should have recorded it myself, actually, but that was the long and the short of it. So he's up to something. I don't know exactly what it is, but he's definitely up to something.
I definitely want to speak with him. You know, there are people. I want to have Richard Gage on the show. He actually backed out of an interview. It just so happens that right after Dr. Judy's Thursday and Friday presentation last week, that Richard Gage was going to be on a show here in Los Angeles, and I had made contact with the host here it was a pretty big AM station, and he had basically had awakened to a lot of the questions that he was going to pose to Richard Gage. And Richard Gage actually backed out of the interview. So I want to have Richard Gage on my show. I want to speak with him. I'd love to invite Stephen Jones and all of these people and just to approach these very serious questions that need to be posed, and they need to answer them publicly. Yeah,
I mean, if you can get them on and get them to, if they've got an honest answer, then I'm great. If they're willing to say, well, I was wrong, and if they've got a good, even better, if they've got a good an explanation that hangs together and shows that what we've said is wrong, then I've been sat here now for 4 years waiting for somebody to actually find fault with something that we've said, rather than just attack a character or pick on a little detail which doesn't really change anything.
That's right.
But nobody's been able to do that in 4 years. So I'm still doing the same things that I've been doing all that time.
Absolutely, sir. You are coming up on December 21st, just as we are. We are all together on December 21st. The Mayan calendar ends. What do you think is going to happen, sir? What's your? I know you're not in the business of making predictions, but what are your thoughts?
Well, my general feeling about the 2012 scenario is there is definitely something going on in terms of, the very fact that we're doing this and you're doing your program the way you are. I think that is indicative of a larger process that's going on. And it does appear to involve a shift in the way that we perceive things, And the other day, for example, we were discussing this whole thing with the Batman movie, weren't we? And the weirdness with the Batman movie and the shooting. And the fact that somebody's been able to see that very quickly after the events, to me, indicates that there is a level of perception in the population which is much, much higher now than it was a few years ago, or is in much greater abundance than it was a few years ago. And I think that is indeed indicative of some larger scale process. I don't think the world is going to end on December the 21st, and I don't think there is going to be some huge cataclysm, but there is no denying, for example, that there's been an increase in the number and severity of the earthquakes. Is that some process involving, the Earth itself, or is it being done with technology? As we've asked the question, if you look at how the towers were destroyed, scale that technology up or move it in a different direction,
right? Can
it cause all these earthquakes and so on?
Right.
So I don't know. I think things are going on
within. Well, I'm sorry.
But whether there's going to be some great big event on the 21st, well, I doubt that, frankly, at this point.
Within the past week, as a matter of fact, I used to think that, December 21st is going to come and go like Y2K. So I kind of scoffed at it. And within the past week, I've realized that something powerful is happening right now in our presence. And you just stated it, that we now have a population, even if it's a small portion, but it could grow exponentially, of people that are awake, aware, and a level of consciousness could take place right around this time, December 21st, and it's happening, coincidentally, right in line with it. But I agree that December 21st could be not an end to anything, but a beginning of something huge for fellow men, right?
Right, and I think somebody else pointed out to me that there was, if you look at 9/11, was, I think, it's obviously 11 years before. It's very nearly 11 years from 9/11 to where we are now. Well, it is 11 years from where we are to now, but I think it's 11 years and then a number of days. And if you count the number of days, that's got a significance to the number 11 as well. So it's interesting that 9/11 was, in the new millennium. Because there was no year zero, so effectively 2001 was the new millennium, according to the mathematicians at least. And then here we are 11 years later, just before 2012. So there is some significance in the numerology, I think, somehow, some way, shape, or form. But there is stuff going on, and maybe we're at the central point of this process, and we're moving forward now into this new area, which is where we can create our own world more. We've got more of an ability to create our own future rather than being under the purview of this secret group that's running things. They're not going to have it all their own way from this point forwards.
No.
If they did, we wouldn't still be here.
That's right. Dr. Judy says he who controls the energy controls the people. And I believe that they're using this energy for evil as a weapon. But I believe, and I'd like to conclude this after-hour session with your thoughts on the fact that I believe that the greatest weapon in the history of mankind will be the Grand Awakening. That they will never be able to use any weapon against us other than just wiping us out as a population. But it's the best weapon that we have to oppose them is awareness and knowledge.
I think that's it. I think, once you make yourself aware, then you can break free of the mass consciousness. That's what actually somebody said that to me about, I think it was about 2005. They said, look, you've, because of the way that you've approached this, you've broken free of mass consciousness. You're thinking independently, and when you reach that point, your whole life changes, like you were saying earlier on. And this is 9/11 is one of those things that can, when you study it and work it out, it forces you to break away from that mindset and start exploring your own avenues on your own terms, So I think that's the knowledge, gaining knowledge.
Yeah.
is obviously the trigger for that.
I think that we have very, very simply in a language that everyone can understand. Hold on a second. In a language that we can understand. All understand, that is. I believe that we've laid things out in this episode and in Dr. Judy's presentation last week. We've given something to everyone that they can share with their friends and family. So
I hope so.
Yeah. I thank you very much for your time. And I highly encourage you, if you're listening to these words right now, this after-hour session of the Pete Santilli Show. Share this with as many people as you possibly can. And, of course, go to the website, pick up a copy of Andrew Johnson's free ebook. And if you want to purchase the Where Did the Towers Go book as well, you can do that at the top of our page. So thank you very much, Andrew Johnson.
Thanks very much, Pete. Much appreciated. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for all your